And then we flew down to Australia, Western Australia, and our plans were to spend 4 weeks there. And we actually had flights all booked out of there to New Zealand, was our next stop. Little did we know that we would end up spending 8 months in Australia. Things definitely took a change for us. That was probably one of the hardest times that we've had over the past couple of years, was going through that. Do we stay in Australia? Do we go back to the US? And when the US came out with their guidance to either return back to the US or be prepared to stay in place, we actually booked flights home for the next day. And then the next day we woke up, and then that was when we made that decision.
Plans can change. Whether we change our plans to chase an adventure or something changes those plans for us. This Friday's guest is in the second category. Jay, Christy, and their two littles, Chloe and Camden, aka Puddles and Passports family, had started in September of 2019 with plans to explore the world. And then with little warning and no idea how much it would change our world, COVID hit. Now they are exploring their own country as they wait to see what tomorrow brings.
Christy's country.
Yeah, Christy's country. Sound familiar, Amanda?
It does. We had plans to go overseas. We actually had like a couple of months just before we were about to go take off and do all the stuff, and COVID came, and we just had to X-nay basically all of it. And so basically what we ended up having to do is just shift how we were going to do our adventures. And that's what we've done. So now we're in Nova Scotia, enjoying doing some travel around the east coast of Canada. So
exploring our own country.
So welcome to the show, Jay and Christy. We're so happy to have you here. And so we just want to get into our first question with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how your world tour kind of began, kind of where it started, your Australia trip, and also kind of some of the places that you've been to now in the States?
I'm Jay, this is Christy. Probably could figure that out.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Looking forward to discussing some of our travel plans with you guys. So we set off in 2019 in September. And as you said in your intro, we had these grand plans for this big trip around the world. And we set off and flew into Italy. That was our first stop. And then we explored around Europe for 3 or 4 months. We went to Germany, Croatia, Hungary, the UK. And then from there, we went over to Thailand, spent a month in Thailand. And then we flew down to Australia, Western Australia. And our plans were to spend 4 weeks there. And we actually had flights all booked out of there to New Zealand, was our next stop. Little did we know that we would end up spending 8 months in Australia. Things definitely took a change for us. That was probably one of the hardest times that we've had over the past couple of years, was going through that. Do we stay in Australia? Do we go back to the US? And when the US came out with their guidance to either return back to the US or be prepared to stay in place, we actually booked flights home for the next day. And then the next day we woke up and we had a big change of heart and we cancelled those flights. And then that was when we made that decision that we were just going to ride it out. And so it's probably one of the best decisions we made.
Yeah, in hindsight, I mean, there was no way to have known that it was a great decision. You know, Australia managed things differently and very well from our perspective. Yeah, we got to explore Western Australia, which is just this huge, vast land of beauty and wonderful people and exotic to us animals and just wonderful places to see. People say, oh, we heard you got stuck in Australia. And we said, well, yeah, but stuck in like the best sense of the word you can imagine. So we were really honored to be stuck in Australia. So it worked out for us.
Yeah, we always say that we felt like we won the COVID lottery. Again, stuck there. And we were watching everything that was going on around the world, just basically through a TV. We were going about our lives. Every day was just a normal day. I mean, there was a short lockdown, 6 weeks, I think it was. But then after that, everything eased up and we just basically lived our life as normal. And then we actually had to return home. The reason why we came back was because of my legal status. I'm from England originally, so I have a US green card. If you stay outside of the country for more than a year, then you run the risk of, losing your residency. They recommend that you don't stay out past 6 months. When we got to the border and we spoke to the agent and explained our situation, fortunately, he allowed me back in.
That's good.
But we were told, yeah, exactly. We were told that if I'd stayed out 1 day past, then they probably wouldn't have let me in.
Oh, wow.
We couldn't risk, them not letting me in, but letting my family in. And then would they send me back to the UK? And obviously this was in the height of COVID.
That was last September. So we were overseas literally 363 days. I think it was just a couple days
literally
shy of
2
a year.
days.
And so then since last September, we've been slowly, cautiously moving up and down the East Coast. So we started in Florida, and then slowly worked our way with about 4 or 5 stops up to Bar Harbor, Maine is the closest we got, which is kind of within striking distance of where you all are.
It's not too far.
Yeah, just
Not
thinking
far
that.
from us.
Yeah.
And then we slowly made our way back down. And so, yeah, we've been staying in places kind of in the off season. We were in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, when it was still cold in the end of winter. And same with Bar Harbor. We made it up there and out before Memorial Day, before it got super crazy. So that's worked well for us.
The interesting thing is, our plan was to only travel for 12 months. We were going to, from September 19 to September 2020, that was our plan. But then because we ended up spending so much time in Australia, and then our daughter was at an age when she would have been starting kindergarten, but schools were closed. So even if we had come back, we'd have been like, well, we might as well keep traveling. And we never ever talked about homeschooling prior to doing this trip, but now we're homeschooling our daughter and our son now. Got to give it a pat on this back. She's doing an amazing job. So.
So far, so great. It's fun.
Yeah. So speaking of homeschooling, we know there's a lot of philosophies and ideas about education, and you got world schooling, on-schooling, homeschooling. So where does your family fit into those categories, and how difficult do you find to educate and travel at the same time?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah, she just would have graduated from kindergarten, I guess, this last May technically. And next month she will be starting first grade. And I'm new to it all. So I've just been doing lots of research. I actually attended a homeschool convention in Jacksonville, Florida last month, just to kind of hear from other people who've been at it for decades and hear from different speakers and talk to vendors about curriculum options and everything. Some of the research that I did looking at websites about what's required in each state, in terms of recording and keeping records of things, I was learning about those different categories you mentioned. And I would just say that some of the methodologies or approaches that we like are the classical approach, the Charlotte Mason approach, nature-based learning. Also a little bit of traditional, just making sure all the subjects are in there. So we're kind of figuring out as we go and pulling from different methodologies what we like and what dovetails nicely with how our family operates and what we see and what we go out and do as a family anyway. We love hiking and walking and beaches and forests and mountains and all that. So nature journaling kind of works well with what we do anyway.
Now, one of the things that we really like to talk about in our interviews is to do with income, expenses, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people are very inspired to do traveling with their family and things like that, but money is just, it's always one of those things in life. People get very nervous about the idea of being able to have the money to be able to do travel.
Yeah, and whenever you watch travel blogs too, sometimes you're wondering, did these people are they born rich and they could just, they have all this money, or how do they make this work?
So what are some income sources for you guys that help you be able to go and do some of this travel?
So we have several sources of income, which has certainly helped us. So I actually recruit soccer players, high school soccer players, for a university in the UK. Well, for 2 universities, actually. It's called UDA, University Degrees Abroad. We target high-level soccer players that can play in a, somewhat of a semi-professional academy. So I've been recruiting for them for the past several years. And, so I get paid on a commission basis for players that I bring in. And I also help them do their summer tours and seasonal tours. So we take players over to the UK through that as well. So I'm in charge of that. So soccer is big in our family. We're a big soccer family. Or at least I'm a big soccer part of the family.
It totally makes sense if that's if that's one of the jobs that you do. That's
but we were involved in a youth soccer club in San Antonio. So we actually own some soccer fields. The club that now operates, the club that we used to operate, is renting those fields from us on a monthly basis.
How do you get into that? I don't even think I ever realized you could rent a soccer field. This just wouldn't have even come into my mind. So this is just such an interesting thing to me. Like, how did that happen?
I think each town and each city is very different, because a lot of them have they're all just public parks.
Yeah, even the culture of each country, because you would say growing up in England, you never had to pay to use a soccer field, but
rent private fields.
Yeah, the industry is just different wherever you go, I guess.
But we live in San Antonio, Texas. That's where our home is. At the time, a lot of the complexes were private, and there was very few places where kids could just go and play without having to pay to use the fields. And we were fortunate enough to, strike a deal, and there were already soccer fields. They'd just been neglected over the years, and we put some money into them to get them up to scratch. And we have 42 acres of soccer fields, so we've got 7 full-size fields, and we actually have the only cricket pitch in San Antonio.
Oh man, okay.
Yeah, it's rented out from us on a triple net lease, so we're actually not involved at all now, which is just, works out nice for us. And on top of that, another source of income we rent our home out. We had to find someone that would not only want to rent our house out, also look after our dogs.
Yeah, we have 2 dogs at home.
Yeah, which we haven't seen for 2 years.
It must be hard.
Yeah.
But that's also one of our biggest expenses. We still pay our property taxes on our house. So having that income and insurance and rental insurance. So having that income pretty much just covers the expenses on that side. And then now we've got the YouTube channel. We were monetized several months ago now. We're doing quite well. I mean, it's bringing in, just under $500 a month now, just from ad revenue. So that's certainly helped. And each month it's been, slowly ticking up.
Yeah, that's the tangled web we've
woven. Yeah, so we've got several sources of income.
It's actually great because one of the interviews that we did, we talked about how you shouldn't have your eggs all in one basket. So you guys have many baskets.
Yeah.
And that's good because then that way, if like one of the things kind of just for some reason just isn't working for a little while, you got other ones to still kind of fall back on.
Funny you say that because that was something that we did talk about prior to setting off on this trip, because with just one source of income, if we could be halfway around the world and suddenly that source of income dries up and we have no money, we're back to square one again. From an expense standpoint, our biggest expense right now is accommodation. Last year, when we were traveling more frequently, we were paying for flights, and obviously with 4 of us, that starts to add up.
Yeah, so we try to be creative with miles and points with airlines, and if it makes sense to use miles, then we do.
And we're using air miles a lot now because we're doing some domestic travel, and we're finding some great deals with our Delta air miles.
Yeah, we haven't been on a flight yet since we came back to the States from Australia. So Jay's referring to, we booked a flight to Colorado in mid-September. So that will be our first flight, since returning. So it'll be just over a year. We're just easing ourselves back into that whole space of travel.
I was thinking about this. I think it's going to be our longest time without flying in 20 years. Flights are a big expense. Accommodation, I don't mind saying we budget around $3,000 a month for our accommodation.
But we work hard to stay well under that. Yeah. That's like our max budget. So not every month do we spend that much on accommodation. So again, like I mentioned, staying places in the off season, and staying for longer stints, we can negotiate, or we try to negotiate with hosts on Airbnb, for example. If we're a month-long stay in the off season, we have found much better rates, as you can imagine, than a 2-week stay in the in season when it's super popular. Yeah. So
that includes us trying to get 4 months of the year free accommodation. It's not 3,000 times 12, it's 3,000 times 8 is what we kind of budget. And we've done things like house sitting with trusted house sitters. When we were in Australia.
Can I ask how hard was that for you guys to do that with kids? Because that's something we had thought about in the past, but I always worry, is it hard to find gigs or whatever when you have kids?
You can answer
that. It totally depends. It depends on the host, 100%. I mean, they run the whole spectrum, as you can imagine. So some people might not be interested, but as long as you're open and transparent when you apply for a house sitting job and you let them know your kids and their ages. We found a place in Plauen, Germany 2 Christmases ago. They have 3 young kids, but they have 2 cats, and they were traveling somewhere for the holidays for Christmas. And they loved the fact that we had kids because they said, oh, there's going to be a family in our home for Christmas with our cats. You can open presents and play with our toys. So they actually preferred a family with kiddos because they wanted to know that their home was being loved and all the toys were being used. So that worked out really well.
Yeah, and then when we were in Australia, have you heard of woofing?
We have, yeah. But maybe explain it for people who are watching.
It used to stand for Willing Work on Organic Farms. It has a different...
Now it's like Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms or something.
Yeah, the concept is pretty simple, really. You actually contact them. We'd open up an account, which is very affordable. And then you contact multiple farms or eco-villages, and then we would actually go and stay with them. We would get free accommodation in return for us working 3 or 4 hours a day. And again, we would always be very clear that Krista's right now teaching and doing the homeschooling, and so I would be the one that was doing the work. So I would work for 4 hours a day, and sometimes 5 hours a day. And again, in return, we got free accommodation. And sometimes, they might come back and say, well, because there's only one of you working, can we do just accommodation and not meals? But we sometimes prefer that anyway. We were down in a place called Denmark in Western Australia, and we stayed at an eco-village. There was this little village with about 12 homes. They were all working together on sustainable living and growing their own plants and food. And we just learned so much from them. And they had young kids in the village as well. And that's actually where we were when we found out that we had to decide whether we were going to go back to the US, they'll stay in Australia. That having that community around us really helped us. We had other grown-ups that we can actually communicate.
Yes, I'm sure it was also nice to have other kids in that area for like your kids to play with, because I know it's hard on our kids if they don't have someone to play with, right? And I do think that that's something that probably parents worry about when they think about going traveling, like how do your kids connect and make friends and do all that kind of stuff. But if you're kind of a part of a little community like that, the way that you guys travel, it seems like you're somewhere for about a month or a little bit more. So when you do that, it does give you a bit more opportunity to be able to connect.
It does. Even like the month before COVID, so February of 2020, we were in the Perth area, and we enrolled our kiddos a couple days a week in a local preschool, just so they could socialize, hear from other grown-ups. You know, we could go exploring, and it was good for the family, and it was a good balance.
Just going back on the accommodation, you're right. It is something that a lot of families will worry about. How do you pay for accommodation? Oh, surely it's really expensive. And it can be. But if you think about it, if you can combine doing some house sitting, doing some woofing, maybe if you've got family that stay in, other parts of the country that you might want to go and visit. But then if you even think about staying in Airbnbs, there are many ways actually to reduce those costs. And, you can negotiate, get better rates. If you stay longer than 7 days, you can normally get a better rate. If you stay a month, we've gone as much as a 50% discount. But when you stay in an Airbnb, one thing that some families don't remember is that you don't have any overhead costs other than paying the rental. You're not paying for your air conditioning. You're not paying for your cable. You're not paying for your lawn maintenance. You're not paying for your taxes. You're not paying property taxes. That's what the way we look at it. It can actually sometimes be more affordable to travel. Depending on the country and depending on your overheads.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely actually a number of countries out there that you could go to if you're, a bit more flexible and depending on COVID and all those things. There are definitely countries out there that even as a family, you could probably live off of $2,000 to $3,000 a month.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. The first country we considered before COVID was Albania. We were going to spend 3 months there and do Airbnb, rent by the month. The rentals were $600, $800 a month.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Canadian.
Yeah. What made you choose Albania? I love that choice.
So I had a pull to Eastern Europe, and we were just trying to find a way to do things more economically. Western Europe, as beautiful as it is, it can also be a bit more expensive. So we're just trying to find cheaper ways to kind of go about it. And Albania is also so centrally located. So like hop over flights to Turkey or to Croatia or whatever.
Italy.
Yeah, even Italy.
Greece.
Yeah, you can take a ferry over it, but it was cheap and it's on the Mediterranean and it's quite beautiful and there's a big expat community there and it had all the things, but I feel like it's one of those places that not a lot of people think about.
We kept joking that it was the next Croatia.
It's Croatia all of a sudden at some point just became like the place. I feel like Albania is going to get there.
Yeah, interesting.
You have to let us know how it goes when you get there.
Yeah,
we will.
Yeah, we will. And Airbnbs, the other good thing about it is that when you're doing long-term stays like that, because a lot of people will just think travel is like hotels and it's resorts and it's all these things, but it's not, it doesn't have to be that way, right? And the great thing about Airbnbs is you save money because you can get groceries, you can make a lot of your meals. It's just like having your own home, right? So you save that way. You don't have to eat out all the time.
Yeah, and especially as you guys already mentioned, the off season or even the shoulder seasons are usually a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and depending on where you're going, like we were up in Bar Harbor for a month and we were there during the off season. We literally had Arcadia National Park pretty much to ourselves. And yet you look at now, there is literally hundreds of thousands of people embarking on national parks, and Arcadia's in the top 10. And I watched YouTube channels and I said, wow, we were so lucky. We were like on those hikes and we didn't see anybody. There's benefits to going places in the off season.
I do know that I've seen a lot of like parents that get a little bit nervous about the idea of, again, taking their kids out of the normal life and the different things, right? And so they get nervous about that idea.
I still get anxiety about that idea.
Oh, okay.
So for our son, when we left in September of 2019, he was barely 18 months old. For him, I think it's all he's known. So he loves trains, he loves planes, kind of is like along for the ride. And so he's pretty good with the flow. Chloe as well, though. Chloe is really good about following instructions and packing her things. And she has a little suitcase now that she totes behind. And
she does all her own packing.
And I would say, honestly, sometimes they're much more adaptable or adaptive than we are.
And they get excited because, we've been to quite a lot. a lot of Airbnbs now.
Mm.
So like Camden will be, asking like, oh, what's our next home like, and where we're going to be going next, and so they do really, and we try and involve them as much as possible and let them know where we're going and what we're doing and what our plans are.
Yeah, like
I think that's really important.
Yeah, especially preparing for like travel days.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're going to be in the car for 10 hours tomorrow, so let's think about some fun things we can do together. And I also have things that I bring with me to every place that I put up on the walls, like their artwork and things, because I still want it to feel like a home. And so even though Airbnbs can be blank slates, which is nice in one regard, it's very minimalist and uncluttered, I still want them to see their art on the wall or on their fridge, and I bring cinnamon and cumin and some spices that I bring that they like to smell while I'm cooking. And so those things we always have with us. I have a homeschool box that has familiar art supplies and some toys and trinkets that they like. So yeah, so bringing familiar things along for all of us, I think, helps.
That's great advice for not just world traveling families, but also for expats too, having like that touch of home wherever you go.
Yeah,
really makes a big difference.
I'd say what both of them struggle with is the lack of interaction with other children, because we're always on the move quite a lot. Sometimes we'll make really good connections with other families that have kids, and then 2 days later, either we're moving or they're moving.
Right.
So that's been quite challenging.
Then again, I wonder, because of COVID and schools being remote or in person, I feel like everyone's kind of going through a change and a shift in the way they socialize in general. So
fair enough.
I think our kiddos show interest in other kids and they love to make friends. It's a journey like every family's going through.
Even for us coming here, because we live fairly remotely as well. So for our boys, it's been a bit challenging because there's not a lot of kids around, but we've been able to manage to find ways to like meet up for play dates. And as long as we can get that going, they seem pretty happy. We just got to always remember, like, think ahead and make play dates and do all that kind of stuff. So that helps it a lot.
Yeah, we found Facebook really helpful for that, play dates and meeting people. And
yeah, if you can find a Facebook group for that area, then you can go on and often try to find ways to create meetups and things like that with
other families.
So you touched a little bit on this, like thinking like sometimes it gives you're a little bit worried about being away from the home and all that kind of stuff. And for the kids, before you guys got started, did you guys have any fears that you had to kind of get over before you took the plunge and actually started traveling? Was there any thing that kind of held you back, and how did you get over it?
You want to take that one first?
Yeah, I don't know that it was a fear that we really knew about prior to traveling, but maybe a fear that now we've talked it over that was probably something that was holding us back a little bit. And that's that society doesn't say that traveling full time is normal. I think people get caught up in the idea, well, our kids need to be in school 5 days a week. We can only travel during the summer holidays. We can only go and see our family around Christmas time. And that's normal. Society has just told us that's how we should live our life. Doing what we're doing, we've kind of seen that that doesn't have to be the way. We're now educating our children differently. We're showing them what other kids are seeing in school books. I'll tell you a funny story, actually. We took Chloe to New Zealand. We went back to San Antonio, and Chloe at the time was going to a preschool. And the teacher came up to me after one day in school and said, Mrs. Bow, I just wanted to let you know that your daughter was telling a lie in school today. And he says, yeah, we were talking about kiwis. And the bird. And Chloe had put her hand up and says, oh, I've seen real kiwis. I've seen real life kiwis. And the teacher was like, no, you've not, Chloe. Come on, let's not be telling first. Anyway, so this teacher comes up to me afterwards and tells me this. And I was like, yeah. And we went to this place where we went and spent the afternoon with kiwis. It was really bizarre, but I was like, it's so cool. It sticks in my mind because we're showing our kids these really cool experiences, but other people or teachers at that particular school were like surprised that she had been to New Zealand and she's only 3 years old.
We taught in an English school in Kuwait. And so we had a chance to travel to a bunch of different places. And so for us, it's really fun, when certain things come up and we can be like, look, we saw that. We were there, with our son, Corbin, he was with us. To be able to say, you've seen this and we've done this.
It's definitely not for everybody. It can be quite challenging traveling full time with kids. And it's not also accessible to everybody. And we certainly appreciate that. And we know that we've been quite fortunate to, position ourselves where we can do it. But there's more and more people that are being able to work remote. COVID's obviously increased that. So I would encourage parents to go and speak with lawyers and say, look, is there any way I can work remote for a couple of months? We want to go and give this a go.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. We talked a little bit about your YouTube channel. Can you tell us a bit more about it? Tell us the name, where people can find you, and what they might expect when they come to your channel.
So our YouTube channel is called Puddles and Passports. When we started our channel, it was more for us in terms of like just creating videos for like a library, if you like, for our kids and what we were doing. And but then we wanted to figure out a way to kind of make it a little bit more of a business. And then once the pandemic started, we were seeing a lot of small businesses that were really struggling. So we tried to figure out a way that we could use our channel to help the communities that we were visiting. So we transitioned to more travel guide, showcasing the towns and the villages and the places that we've been visiting. And we've been working with different businesses and helping showcase their business. Christy does the scripts and the research, and then I do the editing, and you do the voiceovers as well. So her voice is better than mine. Yeah, we try and put out one video a week. Yeah, so yeah, we're Puddles and Passports, and feel free to check us out.
Do you guys have any like Facebook or like Instagram?
We do. We're on Facebook, again, Puddles and Passports, and on Instagram, it's Puddles and Passports, and then the number 4. For all of us in our family.
What we're going to do is we're going to just put the link to your YouTube channel and any links to your social media accounts, and we'll put them in the description below.
Thank you.
So if there's a family out there that's thinking about full-time travel, they're one of those families that is built for full-time travel, but they're just not sure how to begin, what advice would you give them?
And the first thing I'd say is go to our website, and Christy actually wrote a very detailed blog outlining 18 months of steps to take in preparation for traveling full time. But I'd say write down very detailed list of everything that you can possibly think of that you need to get done and get ready before you depart, so to speak, and then just start slowly chipping away at it. I mean, if you're planning on doing this and you want to leave next month, I'd say it's going to be very, very difficult, depending on your situation.
Well, that's great advice. So we'll try to get a link to that blog post then to put in the description so that people can kind of check it out and see, some of the steps that they can do. You guys are staying in the States for now?
We are. We were planning, and even up till about 2 months ago, we had some pretty serious conversations about spending Christmas in Germany and then going to Portugal. But then with everything that's going on, there's just no way of knowing. We could be over there in a small 2-bedroom apartment and the country shuts down and we're stuck. So we've decided that we're probably going to head back to San Antonio in January, settle for a little time, and then just see how the world kind of calms down and then take it from there. We're going to continue to upload regular videos about travel and the travel that we've been doing and answering questions and helping other families prepare for when they want to set off on their journey.
And that's kind of what we're doing here too, because I think now is the time to start, right? So you guys talk about how it's like 18 months to kind of get it planned and ready to go. For families, now is the time to start planning so that when things are more open and hopefully things kind of get back to normal and you can do this, then you're ready for it, right? So instead of waiting until everything opens and then starting to plan, you might as well start now. So watching these interviews and getting some ideas and starting to kind of at least get some
starting your 18-month list
so that when things are open, you can go and do it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be easier for families to do this because I think the pandemic is going to encourage more families to do it. So there's going to be a larger community of families that are traveling and working remotely. Whether that's stateside or international is yet to be seen. But I do think you're going to see an influx of families that are going to take this lifestyle and at least give it a go for a couple of years and see if it works for them.
I think COVID's really let the genie out of the bottle for remote work. And I think a lot of companies for a long time have seen that sort of trend growing, but were hesitant to even try. And then COVID forced them to try it and they're like, oh, okay, everything still got done.
Well, it has been amazing talking with you guys.
Yeah, meet you too.
Yeah, we really enjoy being able to talk with some people about how their kind of travels are going. You guys are doing some pretty cool stuff. So fun for us because it's actually like each person is just a little bit different or a lot different actually. Right? And so far it's been really cool. So I've been following you guys now for a little while. I found your YouTube channel a few months ago. So
that's true. Amanda was very excited when you guys got back to us because she's like, okay, so I applied to these guys and these guys and these guys, and I applied to Puddles and Passports. I hope they get back to me.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Well, we're so glad you invited us. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Love talking about what we're doing with the travel side of things. And again, if we can help other families decide on where to visit next. That's what we're trying to do now. It's kind of like our mission, so to speak. So
if anybody has any questions about what it's like to travel as a family that have come up during this video, then please make sure that you comment below, and make sure to check out some of our other interviews that we have posted as well, just to get some even more ideas of how you can start to even travel and have adventures now, locally, nationally, or even internationally. Check out all of our videos, subscribe so that you don't miss any of them. Comment below with any questions that you have. If you have any questions specifically for Jay and Christy, then put them down and I'll try to see if I can get them to pop on to answer any of them. So I'll let them know.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And we will be putting your YouTube channel down below and all of the links to the different things we talked about today. Like,
subscribe, and follow us every
further mile.